so today we're going to go through the intro to GitLab, lunch and learn or webinar if you want, and kind of go through the talking points. We're not going through the entire slide deck. We're not presenting the slide deck. We're just talking about what we would be talking about. So train the trainer approach. Keep in mind that this is designed to be about 45 minutes plus, 10, 15 minutes Q&A is what this one's designed for. So when you're budgeting your time, think about that.
Okay.
All right.
So do you typically schedule it for an hour or like 45 minutes, 50 minutes?
No, I schedule these all for an hour. Yeah, there's a couple that are a little bit longer that I recommend potentially doing a block, but you can squeeze them into an hour. But this one you'll have a few minutes left at the end of the hour.
Okay, perfect.
All right. So this is the introduction slide. I like to keep these generic. So you could customize these and like put your name or the date or the name of the customer on here. I don't, because I'm lazy and I just like to go to fly with slides. But this is where I would introduce myself or whoever's presenting it on behalf of like whoever's the host, or if you have that, they could do that. And just talk about like, this is just a general introduction. In the speaker's notes, we generally have stuff that you can kind of review. We're still iterating on these, so there's some area for improvement, but they're pretty good on these core ones because we've spent a lot of time over the last year making them as easy as possible for new folks to this presentation.
Perfect.
I decided to put kind of this generic slide in from the kind of the sales deck. Because this is an intro, some people may not even know what GitLab is. So I like to kind of spend a minute or two doing a recap for those that don't even know, like if someone's attending this, their organization's using GitLab for the first time, they have no idea what it is. I like to kind of just give a high level overview of how it's the one DevOps platform. There's a lot of different capabilities built in. We're going to hit on a lot of them in today's session, but at a very high level. And I literally stole this from one of the sales decks. So you can use this however you want or eliminate it.
Okay. Who do you normally make sure is in the room for this specific one? Is it, do you have a developer? Do you have somebody from the ops side? Like who should we make sure on the customer side is involved with the intro to GitLab?
Intro is really a fundamental one, like foundational. I would say everybody, like no matter what your role is, even if you're, a manager or someone that might not be hands-on keyboard with GitLab, I would recommend they attend this session because it kind of shows them the art of the possible. They're going to be interacting with issues. They're going to be interacting potentially with approving merge requests. They're going to be interacting with looking at security results maybe. And we hit a little bit of everything in this one, just a tiny bit of everything in this one. So yeah, all personas are welcome for this one. And there's a link I can get you to one of our handbook pages that has a description of these and like who the intended audience is. But this one's very generic, so I'd say everybody.
Awesome.
And this is another optional slide, depending on your audience. You could take this one out, but I like to emphasize with this slide that GitLab helps you to shift to the concurrent DevSecOps paradigm. If you're doing things sequentially or you have bottlenecks in your process now, GitLab can help you to smooth those out and can help you to improve. But GitLab is very flexible, right? You can use it in whatever way you want. If you have a waterfall process right now, you can still use GitLab, right? It's not going to stop you from doing that, but it does have stuff built in that make it easier and encourages you to do things in more of a concurrent DevSecOps methodology where you have, you're breaking down silos, breaking down handoff points, eliminating some of these negatives and getting all these positives. And then I've got some talk tracks here that you could read if you need to. But again, this is one that if your audience doesn't need this, they're already sold on this, you could just skip this and reserve more time for other portions. Okay, so this one, because this is an intro and people are coming from different systems They may have used other Git-based systems. They may have used other code repository systems. I like to go over, this is my cheat sheet. I always share a copy of the slides with my customers so that they can go through these. I usually do it after the fact, so they're not like skipping ahead, but you can do it however you want. And then basically the idea here is, this is kind of like, because different tools use some of these terms in slightly different ways, I like to kind of level set, like, here are the main terms we're going to be going through and touching on, what they actually mean, and what you may have heard them called in other things. Again, depending on the audience, if they don't need this one, I may just gloss over it and mention it so they can reference it. But if this is like somebody who's, they're a brand new customer to GitLab, I might actually walk through this whole thing and just mention what each of these are.
Okay.
This is one that I include in all of my webinars because I think it's so fundamental and important, which is just basically understanding the GitLab recommended process. Now, again, you don't have to follow this process, but basically the idea here is, not only does it touch on a lot of the features of GitLab, but it also gives you an idea of where your organization's goal might be to get to, right? If you have some of those bottlenecks or old processes and you're looking to get into concurrent DevSecOps, this process could be your target. And so I just explain like kind of how we do things at GitLab. I mentioned the 10 stages, and then kind of the flow with starting with epics and milestones and issues, which we are going to cover in today's session. Assigning the issue to a developer. Once the developer creates a merge request, it will create this separate branch of code. They can then push code either through our web IDE or working locally. Once they do, it'll automatically build and test their code if they have that turned on in GitLab, do security scans, and allow folks to review the results. You can review whether the build and test succeed if you introduced vulnerabilities. And then you can make additional changes and kind of go through this little tiny loop a couple of different times for this short-lived small change. Once you've kind of got these where you like them, and then you can deploy out to a review app. You can also have people approve it, and you can do code reviews and things like that, all built into the merge request, and all of that's built into the merge request, which is awesome. And then ultimately, once it's approved, you can actually merge this code back into your mainline branch and optionally automatically deploy it out, either release it or even deploy it out into your production systems. And so this whole concept of a short-lived feature branch where you're making a small change and getting feedback on the change and getting all of the reviews and approvals so that you have high confidence is like the main emphasis of this slide.
Okay.
And again,
is that where you spend most of the time on this slide, is just walking through that main branch? Okay.
Yeah, walking through kind of this main process. And again, if I didn't emphasize it before, I make sure I emphasize, you don't have to use GitLab this way. This is just what we recommend. Again, if you have a waterfall process or you have a more traditional Scrum Agile rather than DevOps process, you can do all those things in GitLab. It's not going to stop you, but this is what we recommend because it avoids a lot of the pitfalls of some of those other older processes.
Okay. And do you go into at all like why it avoids the pitfalls when you're delivering this, or do you just handle it on a question by question basis?
Yeah, it depends. So I do like when I'm setting these up for customers. If I'm doing it for a specific customer and I know where they're coming from, I will totally emphasize those pieces. If I'm doing this very generically and I don't know, like just like an open webinar that's available to anybody, then I may try to mention some of the why on slides 2 and 3. And this is more the how, but I tend to be pretty fluid with how I do this. And I'll be on this slide and something I should have said on slide 2 will occur to me and I'll just mention it. So there's really no like wrong way to do it. You can use these in different ways depending on your audience. But yeah, definitely between 2, 3, and 5, I like to make sure the why is there, and maybe that's a good argument for actually reversing these two. But anyway, now this one I decided to include 6. I decided to include in this intro because sometimes people get confused between groups and projects and the hierarchy. And so I like to talk about it before I get into the screenshots and what it looks like in GitLab. So here, basically, I just kind of talk about top level groups, how those can have as many subgroups as you want, and then projects can be a member of a group or a subgroup. And then issues, doesn't show it on this slide, but merge requests all live in the project. I used to have a version of this slide that had the epics in it as well, that live at the group level, but I think we took that out during one of the iterations. But the main emphasis here is that when you're setting up your hierarchy, when you're first starting with GitLab, you do need to understand that certain things like flow down, like permissions. If I add someone at this top group level, they will have the same permission level at all the lower levels. And then when we get into labels and milestones, if you create them at the top group level, they'll be available to all of the lower levels. And so because people are coming from, like in Jira and some other systems, project is a group, and then like the word project is used to word group. And so I kind of just emphasize some of those things here, again, depending on my audience and where I know they might be coming from.
So it's a good follow-up to, like, if you did swap slide 4 and 5 because 4 has all of the terminology.
Yeah, actually, you know what? Now that I'm thinking about it, I might actually just do that, because I do think that that's actually a good idea to kind of follow up on that. So yeah, I do think that kind of flows.
Awesome.
Now, here is where we're going to do the transition. So if you like doing interactive questions in the middle of your session, this would be a good time to pause for questions. If you like to reserve them to the end, that's fine too. You can just keep on trucking. But this is the transition slide and you'll see throughout this whole series, I use this transition slide for sections, which is a good time to take a pause, grab a drink, because you'll be talking a lot, whatever. But here's where you could switch to a live demo, or you can use my slides that kind of do a mock demo, sort of. It is not a click-through demo. We used to have some of those available on our website, but this is the next few slides are designed to walk you through what it looks like in GitLab. So you could do a live demo if you wanted to emphasize certain key things, and just skip this next section.
Okay.
All right, so I kind of start at you're in a group, and so the first screenshot I show here, and maybe we could add one that's like a main, like your entry screen into GitLab. But the idea here is that you're in one of your top level groups, although this is actually not a top level group, but this is a group overview. And so we just talked about what groups are, and so I kind of emphasize some different pieces here on the group screenshot. So, and there is a slide coming up on general navigation, so you don't have to go into too much here, but I do emphasize, like, when you're viewing an object in GitLab, like a group, right now we're viewing this Kevin Chassis demo group. There is a menu on the left that has all of the different attributes or different submenus for this group view. And that will change depending on what type of thing you're viewing. And we'll see that throughout the next few slides. And then the other thing I kind of emphasize is when you're on the main group level, it will show you all of the subgroups and projects and how you can expand these out. The groups are represented by this folder icon. The projects are represented by this kind of, I call it a ribbon icon, but I don't really know what the official term is. And so you can quickly see, and then you can quickly drill into any of these. And you can also, mention what these icons over here do, where it's showing you information about how many subgroups and projects there are, and things like that. And you can also create new subgroups and new projects. But we go through that. I kind of circle back to that at the end. So at a minimum, I try to emphasize like what you're seeing here from the group overview, and again, there's talking points here that you can use to read verbatim if you need to.
Okay.
Okay, then so what I did here is, the idea here is that you clicked on the epics from the group page, you clicked on epics, and now you can see I'm still in the Kevin Chassis group. But now instead of getting the group overview, you can see here that I am in the epics subsection, and it's giving me a list of all the epics. And so I might talk a little bit about, we do have more details coming up on epics, but I will mention here that you can filter this list. And I may also mention that within the list, there is inline information about the epic. It's a little hard to see because we've made the screen a little smaller for today's Train the Trainer, but you can see like the issue epic number, when it was created, who created it, and the dates that it's going to run, as well as any labels applied to it, and how many comments and last time it was updated. And you can sort and filter this list. And then we're going to pretend like we clicked on an epic and go into the details of an epic.
Okay.
And so here I'm just focused on the body, where I'll emphasize, just like I will with issues coming up, that within an epic, you can see, the body of it is all defined using Markdown, and within that Markdown, you can do lots of things. You can have headers, formatting, lists, and I go into a little bit more detail on that coming up. But basically, just to emphasize, like, basically you can define what this epic is going to be covering, give folks information about it, and you can break it up into sections, as you see here. And then on the right
typically
side, go ahead.
Share like best practices and like how we as GitLab kind of put together our epics, or do you find that you just provide the screenshot and that's sufficient?
Yeah, so it's a tough balance, right? Because this is an intro. You can start to go down some rabbit holes, and you might get questions that force you down a few rabbit holes if you do live interactive questions. What I might do is I will, when I hit some of these different slides, instead of going into detail in the intro session, because it is kind of a high level, like, here's what's available, I might use it to advertise one of the follow-ups. So say I was going to do all 5 of the sessions that we're going to, I might say, hey, there's a lot more detail. We go into a lot more detail on this in the program webinar, or lunch and learn, or whatever you want to call it. And so, but if this is a customer that's particularly interested, I might spend more time on this part and less time on the merge requests, and some of the other pieces. So it kind of, again, depends on knowing your customer. But if you're doing a generic one, I will use these slides to kind of advertise the other sessions, especially if we schedule them, or even if we haven't, I might advertise them so that customers, the end users, will be demanding of my champion, like, hey, they mentioned this program management, can we get that? Because then that will encourage them to roll into those. The other thing I will not shy away from, and this is good for, I think, the partners as well, is that some of the features that you're going to see in these slides are in Ultimate only. I might point those out, especially if I know I'm presenting to a premium customer, but I won't ignore them. And that has led to upsells, by the way, like where people participating are like, hey, is this feature available? Oh, no, it's Ultimate only. Hey, what can we get Ultimate? You'll have to talk to my main point of contact or your champion or whoever runs your instance. And, some period of time later, they upgraded to Ultimate. So it all works in concert.
Okay.
So there's flexibility with these slides. You could definitely do that. But you'll run out of time if you do that on every one.
Okay. Makes sense.
And then after the kind of main description section, I then show, like, this is scrolling down on that same epic, and you can now see all of the sub epics and sub issues. I emphasize, you can see kind of a summary of how many total epics and issues are here. You can see all of the, you can expand these out like you did with the groups earlier. and the icons that are used. So the kind of stack of papers is an epic, the sheet of paper is an issue. And you can also see summaries of the information. You can also click on these and drill into them. The other thing I'll emphasize on the right here is, so on the right-hand side, whenever you're looking at an object, you're going to get the metadata associated with it. So in this case, you have a start and an end date, which can be fixed or inherited. You have all of the labels that are currently applied. And we'll talk about labels in a little bit more. And you can see, and I'll emphasize a few of these other aspects later, so you don't have to hit everything in the first time you are on one of these screens. And I'll also talk about creating child epics and then issues. And so you have, so like in the program management one, we do a lot more detail on that, where like epics map to, your capabilities, sub epics might be your features, and issues are the user stories and pieces of work that you're actually going to accomplish. And then similarly, so now we're still at the group level, but now since we're talking about issues, I'm going to go ahead and pretend like I clicked on the issues section here on the left, which will then change my entire view. And I'm still in the same group, but now I'm on the issues page. And similar to what we just saw, you get a list of the issues, which you can filter and sort. And you can see a summary of a whole bunch of information, including when it was created, who created it, the weight, the labels, and so on, and as well as how many merge requests and comments and when they were last updated. So you get a lot of information here, and then you can click on any of these to drill into one. The other thing I'll emphasize is that since we're viewing this at the group level, you actually get to see issues from multiple projects, and you can see with the issue number which project it's a member of, because issues live in projects, epics live in groups, and I might use that. But again, we go into a lot more detail on that in the PM one.
Okay.
And then this is showing a filter. So if you apply a filter or a search, you can think of it either way. Then you can filter using lots of different of the fields that are available, including labels and milestones, which we'll cover in a little bit. And then when you do, it will filter the list down to just the ones that match that criteria, obviously. And there's other fields that you can do, including author, assignee, iteration, and keywords as well. Like you can just type keywords for searches.
Cool.
Then I propose that we, clicked on one of these issues to go into the details. So now we're in the details of an issue. I might mention that just like the epic, you can have the description in Markdown and format it and into sections to communicate all the information you want. But then I'll spend a little bit of time on this right-hand side with the metadata associated with the issue, including the fact that you can have multiple assignees. You can see if it belongs to an epic and which epic it belongs to. You can see all the labels that are applied. You can see the milestones, iterations, weight. And I'll explain a little bit about these, although I think we go into milestones and labels in a little bit more detail coming up. But I'll mention the weight has to be a numeric field, but we don't dictate what method you're going to use, but it's just a way to kind of differentiate between more difficult issues and less difficult issues. So you can use those on the boards and others, which we'll show in a bit. And you can have a due date and time tracking, but I usually don't go into a lot of detail here unless there's questions. I usually focus on the top portion.
Do you talk about what's inherited from an epic or how to refine issues in epics, or do you just kind of assume that that's an understood, or do you go through that more in the project management session?
That's probably something I should be doing. I haven't been doing that, but that's certainly something that we could do. But when I deliver this, I personally haven't been doing that, but that might not be a bad thing to include. Whoops.
Okay.
And then this is just scrolling down like we did with the epic. You can scroll down now, seeing related issues, related merge requests, and comments, which I have a little more detail on later. And I might emphasize that both in epics and issues and even merge requests, you can get into the related not only the related items and quickly move into those, but also you can have these threaded conversations and running conversations, which is one of the emphases that we do here at GitLab, since we use GitLab to develop GitLab, that we work asynchronously because we're 100% remote. And I'll try and squeeze that in at some point, depending on where, but it could be on any of the slides really. But when we get into the comments and how everything's designed to allow your team to work asynchronously and see the full history and the conversation on why they made the decision, who was involved, what was the back and forth, all of that is documented, and there's a similar for your issues, and not only for issues but also for epics and merge requests, which we'll get to in a bit. And actually, you know what, this slide covers that as well, with the related issues and the related merge requests, and gives you a little bit more detail, a little more zoom in on. And the other thing I'll emphasize here is that you can not only do comments, but you can also reply to someone else's comment, and it'll create a thread, which is very useful for following those conversations.
Yeah.
I know we're running a little bit low on time, so I want to make sure I at least hit each of the slides. So let me continue here. Then I cover from issues, I'm going to cover boards. And I only talk about issue boards here, but I might mention that there are now epic boards as well. But I'll mention in the epic boards, and we cover this again more in the PM one. And actually, I even have an other one, which is a secondary session that covers issues, labels, and boards, tips and tricks in more detail, but that one is a secondary one. But so I just emphasize that you can have multiple boards. Boards are, you can define any number of columns based on labels, milestones, or assignee. And there's always an open column on the left and a closed column on the right, which has all of the items that aren't matched by one of these. And each of these cards is an issue where you can drag and drop them, and it'll automatically apply whatever the label or milestone or assignee is for whatever. And you can create multiple ones, and I have examples of those in some of those other sessions. But boards are a great way to organize it, and you can also have multiple views and just switch between them. And then I will kind of emphasize, like, moving from the issue into the actual work is where you're going to create the merge request. The merge request is where the developers and approvers are going to work. And I'll emphasize multiple things within the merge request. So the beauty of the merge request here within GitLab is that it's like the central point for all things associated with with the change of the code. And so I'll mention all of the great details that you get with the merge request, including like you can quickly see your last pipeline result, and which is the automated build or the build and test, and you can drill into those and see a summary of those. I'll have a slide that goes into more detail on pipelines coming up. Your approvals are all here. Your security results are all summarized here. As well as you can do not only comments, but inline comments on the code to do asynchronous code reviews, all within the merge request. And kind of the power of having everything in one place.
Yeah.
And then coming off of the pipelines, I will emphasize, what is GitLab CI/CD? Definitely use this to advertise the future CI/CD sessions. And how CI/CD is our automated build and test engine. You can customize it to do, could be as simple as just doing an automated build and some unit tests, or you could do full, automated user interface testing if you want, as well as, deploying out to various environments that can even be controlled by GitLab. And then I just kind of emphasize some of the benefits here, as well as, and then show them what a sample pipeline looks like. And I might mention that it's broken into optional stages, which are optional, sequential. And then you can have as many jobs within a stage as you want. And jobs are the things that actually do the build or run the test or deploy to the environment. And there's a ton of flexibility, and definitely invite them to come to the two different CI/CD sessions that we have.
Okay. So it's a good plug. It's another good plug.
Yeah. And this one I don't have any speakers notes because you can just kind of read this if you had to. But you can use this to talk about. And then circling back, which maybe I should move this up, is kind of like we mentioned labels multiple times. So I spent a little time going more into detail in labels. Labels are a way to filter and group work together. They apply to issues, epics, and merge requests. And I'll mention this is just the screen where you can create and edit labels. You can filter to find the ones you're looking at, and I'll also mention the scoped labels, which are a name value pair of labels, where when you apply one, it'll remove any other one that is already there. I'll also mention priority labels, so you can do sorting and grouping on some of the other views. And then, yeah, I mentioned that they apply to all these different objects. Again, we'll go into labels in a lot more detail in the program management one, but I kind of just mentioned like that they're, used for filtering and like you saw them on the boards earlier. And then similarly, we mentioned milestones. So I'll go into a little detail on milestones and how milestones are a way to group issues and merge requests in a block of time. So you can assign a start and end date to the milestone. And then those can be tagged to releases. They could also be tagged to sprints. They're fully flexible. You can use them however you want. And then when you're looking at the milestone view, you can see a summary of how many issues in merge request and how far along you are with that milestone. At GitLab, we use them for the releases, but you can use them in multiple different ways. Some teams use them for program increments. Some use them just as basic sprints. And then I may also mention, we don't have a dedicated slide for iterations yet because they're relatively new, but iterations are another way to do a smaller time slice if you wanted. And issues and merge requests can belong to one milestone. And then I've got a navigation tips slide where I reemphasize the kind of left navigation bar. I also emphasize the breadcrumbs here, which shows you exactly where you are. And then this is the one screenshot where I included the browser heading because I wanted to emphasize that every time you click on anything in GitLab, it updates the URL, and that's nice because you can then bookmark that. You can share it with a colleague, and they'll get to that exact same view. So even if I filter this, it'll add to the URL. No matter where I am in the UI, the URL is updating, which is a way that you can also navigate.
Oh, that's a good tip. I don't even think about that, but that is such a good tip.
And then I show how you can click on the ... button here to navigate back up the hierarchy, so you can kind of see the full breadcrumbs of where you are to navigate all the way back up to that group level. And then I kind of go back into, from that top group level, the one thing we didn't cover at the beginning was creating a new project. And I kind of cover the main options for creating a project, how we've got templates built in. You can create your own templates, or you can just create a blank project. And generally speaking, I mean, there's a lot more you could go into, obviously, but that's basically like what I've found is that what we're able to get in. And again, the purpose of this session is to kind of give them, here's a quick overview of all the different things that are available, and kind of just teasing a lot of them and just introducing the concepts so that we can build on that in further sessions. And again, these are designed to kind of whet the appetite, and maybe lead into professional services doing full trainings, or further of these sessions, or just more detailed discussions about some of the different features and capabilities. So, and you can emphasize, like you mentioned, if this is a prospect or a newer customer, you can definitely spend more time focusing on the value side of it.
Okay.
Being in post sales, I do try to focus a little bit more on the education side and what you can do within the application. And you can mix and match those if you want. So there is some flexibility. You don't have to use these exactly as I showed, but these are definitely designed more to be like slightly more educational, and but sometimes, like especially with the security one and a couple of the other ones, you are going to have resistant audiences, right? You're going to
Right.
have folks that aren't, their favorite toy just got replaced by GitLab, or
Mm-hmm.
they're the security person who's just grumpy and loves the fact that everything has to go through them, and that's their power at the company, right? So like, they're resistant to anything that's different, right? And you have a lot of those people, and you need to kind of sell them on the benefit and how it's going to benefit them. And so you can definitely emphasize those on some of the different screens. The other thing I will do is I will interweave stories.
Mm-hmm.
So, if I have a story from my past experience or a customer, without mentioning who it is, I may say, oh yeah, I had a customer who used this feature and did this thing, or I used to work here and we made the mistake of doing X. If you do Y using GitLab, you will avoid that, and your experience will be great. And I often just change those up. I think of them as I go on the fly. So it's a good way to kind of personalize them. And you can also, like I said before, decide when you're gonna do Q&A. I personally like to do it throughout and pause
Mm-hmm.
several times. Others like to just do it at the end because they don't want to be interrupted. I actually like being interrupted. Um, but so that's my kind of quick train the trainer on this one.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much, Kevin. Appreciate it. This was super helpful. I think this will be very helpful for the partners as well.